I also headed out recently on an extended research road trip. I left Chicago with my husband and we visited Cahokia Mounds in southern Illinois for the first time. I've become very interested in the civilization of Cahokia lately after learning so much about the possible Nephilim connection to some of these ancient settlements around the world from people like L.A. Marzulli and from Cheryl Carter and other guests that we've had on This Present Darkness here on the channel. I'll be writing about Cahokia in my upcoming book, The Devil in Dreamland. That's my UFO book about the occult connections to the UFO enigma. I also visit Alton, Illinois, a place I've been many, many times, to explore more deeply into the legend of the Piazza bird. And I also did some more research into the first Illinois state prison there, the hauntings of which I wrote about in my book, The Haunting of Joliet Prison. We also went to visit Hannibal, Missouri, home of Mark Twain, which I found out is one of the most haunted towns in America, so more on that later. The last stop on our trip was Iowa City, where we visited the Stanley Museum of Art at the University of Iowa. The museum has many great paintings, sculpture, and textile pieces, and we spent a lot of time there just admiring, enjoying all of the different works that have come into the possession of the museum over many years now. The one work everyone comes to see in this museum is the so-called Guggenheim Pollock, a huge painting called Mural, commissioned of the famed abstract artist Jackson Pollock by Peggy Guggenheim for her New York penthouse. Guggenheim later gave the painting as a gift to the University of Iowa, and it's a point of pilgrimage now for artists and students from the world over. I was really excited to see this painting because years ago now, I conducted a paranormal investigation of a Jackson Pollock painting here in Chicago. I wanted to share with you today the story of how that investigation came to be and what happened in the course of it. In recent years, many works of art have popped up on eBay and other auction sites which their sellers claim to be haunted. Probably the most famous of these is artist Bill Stoneham's 1972 painting, The Hands Resist Him. I'll do a whole segment on haunted and cursed art later this year, but right now we're talking about something a little bit different. And that is the question, does a little bit of the soul or energy of an artist actually remain with his work? Early in 2008, I was contacted by a graduate student at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago who had become intrigued by this fascinating question. Do artists, with all of the emotion invested in their pieces, somehow haunt their works? A colleague and I met with Thomas Goki in his studio space at the school and talked at length about the themes involved in his work, the relationships between the mind and paranormal activity, and the artists who inspired Goki to start thinking about some amazing possibilities. A few weeks later, Goki had obtained permission for us to investigate a number of pieces in the Institute's collection, and we met one afternoon to proceed with this unusual project. We were a strange sight in the galleries that day, holding EM meters and tape recorders to paintings, sculptures, and ancient artifacts. Everywhere we went, security guards were more than a little concerned about our intentions. Our explanations didn't do much to ease them. The awkward feelings, however, were well worth the experience, and we did experience several incidents that made us wonder. The first work investigated was a painting by Jackson Pollock. The painting, entitled Grade Rainbow, was completed in 1953, just a few years before the artist's death. Pollock, of course, had been one of the major influences in the abstract expressionist movement, and his drip painting, or splatter painting, as most describe it, is one of the most recognizable styles of the 20th century. A man of volatile temperament and a voracious alcoholic, Pollock's paintings seem to reflect the often chaotic nature of his personal life. And Goki wondered if there may have been some paranormality involved in his work, reminiscent of the almost spasmodic physical phenomena associated with poltergeist cases, in which a troubled mind is thought to unconsciously influence the movement of objects and other activity. Well, we took temperature readings around the painting and scanned the area to find any fluctuations in the EM or electromagnetic fields around the piece, but nothing out of the ordinary was found, at least through our preliminary investigation. The second piece on the roster was located in the Spander Gallery, a collection of artifacts from the ancient Americas and American Indian art. The initial object of our attention was a piece called The Storyteller, a figure from the West Mexican state of Jalisco. This was circa 100 to 800 AD. Though we asked a number of questions at the display case, and again, I do not conduct these kind of EVP sessions anymore, and I highly caution you against conducting them. You should not be attempting to communicate with spirits of any kind. So with that caveat, we asked a number of questions hoping to capture some audible answers via electronic voice phenomenon, but none came. As we said goodbye, however, our EM meter spiked twice, a possible indication of paranormal activity. In the same gallery, mural fragments and a limestone stele seemed to host no unusual activity, so we moved our investigation back to modern times, and interesting results. Our next stop was an Ad Reinhardt work simply entitled Abstract Painting, one of the artist's so-called black paintings that he produced in the 1960s, not long before his death. A sudden drop in temperature of approximately 15 degrees occurred at one point in our monitoring, and there was an EM spike after we announced we were going to now leave the gallery. It was identical to our experience in the earlier gallery. Without question, the most provocative part of our investigation was that of Carl Andre's steel aluminum plane, completed in 1969, a pattern of floor tiles typical of the artist's work. Andre's work has received much acclaim, but the most talked about aspect of his life is not his art, but an incident that occurred in his personal life. Andre met artist Anna Mendieta at a New York City gallery in 1979, and the two married in 1985. Tragically, Mendieta fell from Andre's 34th story apartment that same year, and her husband was charged with second-degree murder. Andre declined a jury trial, and in 1988 he was acquitted of all charges by the judge of the case. Controversy still rages, however, regarding Mendieta's death, and Goki wondered if we could tap into the truth by somehow channeling the artist, still living, by approaching one of his works. Andre encourages the trampling of his floor-level works of gallery goers, and so I walked onto steel aluminum plane with my EM meter to try and see if the energy of the artist was still present. Again, at that time, I was still conducting EVP sessions where I would ask questions of any spirits present. Again, do not do this. But the moment I squatted down to get closer, before I could start asking my questions, my EM meter spiked again, and the recorder shut itself off. I found it very interesting, and I still do in retrospect today, that all those three exhibits that we visited at the Art Institute seem to have the same response to us. There was definitely something, or seemed to be something present in the EM field that was slightly off, suggesting something paranormal present. But there also seemed to be a definite element trying to get across to us a very distinct message. Basically, leave us alone. So I think this really lines up with the idea that for an artist, his work is very, very personal indeed. And of course, we're all welcome to enjoy it, to look at it, to think about it, and to interpret it ourselves. But there's also a very private area that wants to be kept private by the artist. So did we find that some of the energy, or even maybe some of the spirit or soul of these artists, including Jackson Pollock, still remain with their works so many years after they were completed? I don't know if we can say that, but there does seem to be something else to explore here. And so later this year, we're going to look a little bit more closely at the paranormal and paintings that are rumored to be haunted or cursed. So make sure that you like this video, comment, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so that you can get notified of all of our new videos. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Ursula Bielski. Until next time, remember to pray for ghosts.